Hi, my name is Sheila and this is my channel, Seaside Snuggles Quilts, Patterns, and Crafts, where I focus mainly on quilts, but will craft anything that brings me joy. What brought me joy recently is a customer who reached out to me to find out if I could reconfigure the 5-pointed spinning star block that she purchased from me before. She's working on a special project and needed it shaped so that the star was only 3 inches tall on a 9-inch finished background block. So we've gone from this to this. This tutorial is a slowed down tutorial showing you how to foundation paper piece this new block. If you'd like to join me, I'd love to have you. Let's get started. So we have a sunny day. I thought this would be a good day to record. This is the first iteration of my block, and the way it came together in the center is not what I would really like, and I think I might be able to attribute it to the weights of my fabrics not being the same, and I had a little problem with my sewing machine yesterday, so I'm just going to try to remake it with these fabrics, and they're just scraps because the star pieces are really small, and it's 3 inches. Let me show you here. This is a 3.5-inch ruler. So the star, there's the 1/2-inch mark. It's a little tiny bit bigger, but again, I attribute that to my sewing. 3 by 3 in the center, 3 inches above, 3 inches below the bottom of the legs. Of course, when it's cut, it's a 9.5-inch block, but it will finish 9 inches. So you end up having 3 1/4 above, 3 1/4 below, and to the sides. And this is how she wanted the spin to go, clockwise on the finished block. Remember when you're doing a paper piece pattern that the pieces are in reverse. So each section is going to be a mirror of the finished block because the piecing is actually done right side facing the back of your papers. So let's get started. And what I'm going to do, try not to bump my recorder here. You can, of course, cut your pieces with regular scissors, but I only have my fabric scissors over here, so I'm going to cut with my rotary tool. And this is the rotary tool that I use for both fabric and paper, but I try not to use my other rotary tool for paper, and I absolutely do not use my scissors before you start. Make sure that you check the measurement. I have a 1-inch gauge here. Put your ruler on there, and the lines of your ruler should be centered in the lines of the 1-inch gauge. Make sure that you set your print to actual size or 100% and not fit to page when you print this pattern so that you get an accurate size on the pattern. So, I've checked my size. I know that this is the left-hand side. So this is, these are the right-hand pieces. Even though it looks like the left-hand side, remember we're working with the mirror. Okay, so these are the right side pieces. So if you're making a block where you want the colors to be in a specific position, keep that in mind. I do have it marked dark background, light background. Of course, you can switch that around to light and dark, or if you're using more than one color, just write what you're going to use on the pattern so that you keep yourself squared away. All right, enough jaw jacking. I'm going to cut these apart. And I'm going to leave a little bit beyond. My voice is doing something weird. I probably need some water. I'm going to leave a little bit beyond the edges. 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch works well for me, but leave as much as you like, but do leave some. Okay, I'm going to cut this one next. And I'm going to voice over most of this, but while I have a little bit of quiet here, I thought I'd chit chat with you. Tell you what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So the whole pattern has 6 pieces, 3 on the left, 3 on the right. No Y seams. You just sew it together with stitch line right up the middle. And the very nice lady who requested this is doing it for an organization. And so I thought, you know, if I record this and they have a little trouble putting it together, they'll have this as an instructional tool as well. So, and I'm cutting all the pieces out. I did not remeasure my 1-inch block because I printed these out at the same time. But if you print your pieces out at separate times or at separate print jobs, then make sure that you measure those individual print jobs to make sure that you had your scaling correct. All right, a little bit more. All right, so once I get my pieces cut, we'll call it a rough cut. Let me get this little bit off the top here. Then I need to fold them. And if you have a straight edge, you can fold them against the straight edge. It's usually faster, but I never have a straight edge handy. And so I just fold all of my pieces, and you want to fold all the way across the paper, even if the line doesn't go all the way across the paper. So this is, I'm just choosing one, between 1 and 4. That's my long one. Now I'm going to fold between 2 and 3. And between 2 and 3 does not go all the way across, but I want my fold to go all the way across. And now I'm going to fold between 1 and 2. And now I just want to make all of my folds so that they are towards the front of my paper. Okay. Normally I do my paper piecing on freezer paper. And when you use freezer paper, you sew beside the fold. So that's just my habit transfer. But it will also help when you're placing your pieces of fabric. So that only had one. It only has 2 pieces, so it only has 1 fold or 1 stitch line. So if I were to do these in order, I would go between 1 and 2 first. And I fold it this way first so that I can see the line better. Then you can fold it the other way, or you can fold it all at once in the other direction like I did with the last piece. It doesn't matter. It's up to you. Okay. There's between 2 and 3. And between 1 and 4. And I just want to put that fold right on the line. If you don't fold your papers right, it's possible you'll not get a good fit or a good lineup in your block. Okay, especially if you're using freezer paper. So I'm just going to do what I was doing before and fold the longest one first, the longest marked one. I don't know why, I just prefer that. And I'm going to fast forward through this folding, and then I will meet you at placing the first piece of fabric. So my first block, I reversed the colors and I did light where it says dark and dark where it says light on the background. This one I'm going to follow the instructions just to see how different it looks. Folded now. Now I need to cut my number 1 pieces, and all of my pieces are going to be different because of the spin, and these two are going to be mirrored. So all of my number 1s are dark background. So we're going to go with this piece. And I'm just going to rough cut a piece off of this fat quarter. And yeah, I should have ironed it first. Don't come for me, please. So I'm just going to get these edges together. So these are torn edges. They come torn. And I love that because that means that my grain is correct. Even if this rest of this is weird, this is the grain of my fabric. And let's see here. I'm just going to compare all of my number 1 pieces and see which ones are the fattest. They're all about the same. This is the biggest. So let's cut my strip based on that, and then we'll see what we get out of it. So here's the piece. I'm going to cut it about, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch to an inch larger than that. Use my fabric cutting. All right, let's see what we get here. I'm going to give this a little press. I did press my yellow pieces that are going to be the stars, so that's already pressed. All right. So I'm just going to start with this one. And I'm going to place it so that I have full coverage around the shape. So this is the dark background piece from here to here. I'll put an illustration or something on there. And I want to cut, so these are the edges. So I can take my pattern all the way to the edge of the fabric there on the pieces that are the edge. I'm going to fold it. Normally I would fold it between 1 and 2, but I'm going to try to save some of this. So I'm going to fold it between 1 and 4 here. And I'm going to cut myself a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to stop about here-ish so I can conserve some of my fabric. So I'm going to use my ruler. And I'm going to cut a 1/4 inch away from the seam. I'm going to start about here and then off the page, holding that pattern piece where it is. Now I'm going to cut between 1 and 2. And I'm going to do the same thing, about a 1/4 of an inch off. Then I can pull that away. Then I'm going to take a couple of pins and I'm going to pin this single piece of fabric in place while I work on the rest. So that's what it looks like on the back. Now I'm using batik fabrics right now. If I were using a print fabric, I'd want to place this first piece right side down and then cut the shape for my number 1 piece, right side down. Okay. And I'm going to do all of these and then we'll be back. And I'm putting 2 pins in here because I don't want it to rotate. I'm cutting it pretty close. You can give yourself more of a buffer if you don't feel comfortable with that. I'll do it here. Okay, so that's covered. So you see how I've left a little edge around all of that, and I need a bigger piece, just one big piece for the top. I like this corner. I'm just going to cut the whole thing off here. Okay. I'm also going to cut a piece for A. Oh, it's got a weird, I don't know if that's a stain or part of the batik. Just going to cut a piece off here for this. I like to run all of my pieces through if I can. So this doesn't have a dark piece on it, but it has a light piece on it. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on so I could run it through. Okay, so these are the two yellows I'm going to use for this star. I'm going to use this as the light and this is the dark. So this piece needs a light piece, and I just cut a little section off that kind of mirrors what's there. Let me get a piece here as well. So I'm using this for the pattern, but let me show you what I would use, how I would place it if I was using a piece of fabric that actually had a wrong side and a right side. You see with batiks, you could use either side. Batiks and solids, usually you can use either side. But if I was using a printed piece of fabric, I would lay this on and I would line up this 1/4 inch seam allowance with my paper folded. My fabric is going to be right side up for every piece after piece number 1. Okay, fabric right side up for every piece after piece number 1. But because I'm using this batik, I just need to fit it so that my 1/4 inch that I previously cut is lined up between 1 and 2. And as long as I can see fabric all the way around the shape with the paper folded, it's going to fit. Okay. If I was using freezer paper, I would pin this with the paper folded and then stitch right next to the fold. But I'm going to do this the conventional way, and I'm using regular paper. So I want this open. I'm going to pin the 2 pieces of fabric together, and I'm going to sew right through the paper on top of this stitch line all the way across for this particular piece. Okay, so that's how this one's going to be sewn, and it's ready to go. Let's bring all of our other pieces over. All of these pieces are going to get the dark star leg, which I'm going to cut from this. And I know they're teeny tiny pieces, so I'm just going to go with this first piece and kind of give myself a lot of buffer. The bigger or the smaller the pieces that you're working with, kind of the larger percentage of working fabric you want to work with. You know what I mean? Because this is batik fabric, I can lay it either way and make it work. If I was going to cut this to this piece of fabric, I would want to cut it with it face down. If my paper is not folded, if it's flat, then I want my fabric face down so that I can get a shape that will work. And let me go ahead and cut this like I was going to put it on this piece. So I'm cutting this for my number 2 piece. There's my fold. I'd want to line up my seam allowance, and I can see where the folds are and through the paper where that number 2 piece is. So I know how much I need right there, right? Never mind lining up with the fold. It's face down right now because I'm going to cut it. So what I need is, with it face down, to get it on the fabric so that I have fabric all the way around. And then I feel like this is going to be super wasteful. Let's cut it from this edge. So I'm just going to lay my number 2 piece on there and kind of eyeball where it's at. And then I'm going to give myself a cut. That gives me plenty of space away from the fold. It doesn't even have to be perfect. I just need a piece that fits. Now that I know it fits, I can fold it so that I can see the number 2 piece. Then I want to flip this over so it's right side up. And I want to place that piece down like this. And you see how the number 2 piece has fabric all the way around on all the sides? It's just the number 2 piece. I'm not worried about the number 3 piece. I can lift this up and check and make sure that I have enough. And you want to make sure that it's not just under the piece, that it's not just covered. You want to have 1/4 of an inch all the way around, except on the edges. You don't need 1/4 of an inch. You might want to just go ahead and put it on there, but you don't need it. So you want a piece that has 1/4 of an inch all the way around your shape, except at the edges. If the paper is folded, fabric is up. If the paper is open and flat, fabric is down. That way you'll get the correct shape for what you want, okay? But I'm using this fabric, so I don't have to worry that much because I can flip it over. But I'm going to cut these, if I can remember. I'm going to cut these like this has a specific side that is correct and one that is wrong. All right, so this would be right side down. Okay, and I have fabric all the way around, including off the edge. So now I can flip this piece of fabric over. I can fold this between the 1 and 2, and now I can place it. It might be better. Nope, that's right. I can place it so that my seam allowance is along the edge, and then I have fabric all the way around the shape, right? Even though it's not the same shape as what I cut off, it's all the way around the shape. So I am going to, if this was freezer paper, I would pin it right now, which is what I almost did there. But because it's not, I'm just going to take this pin and I'm going to put it in here like this. Okay, it looks weird, but you're fine. Let's do it again with less talking. All right, so everything's pinned. I want to make sure I have no buckles on the back. And then we will sew these together. Okay, let's get these sewn. So I'm going to sew these corners first because they're the easiest. Yes, I have tan thread in my machine. It's okay. It's all right. So I want my needle, first off, I'm going to lower my stitch length to 1.9, 2.0, something like that, to make my papers a little easier to tear at the end. And then I'm going to stitch right on the line. Okay, and we'll get this one. Make sure that your fabric doesn't get folded underneath. If you got like this long extension like this. Okay, so those are those. Now these, we're going to have to start in the middle of the block. So let me go ahead and cut my thread here. These we're going to need to start in the middle of the block, or we can start at the edge of the block and work our way in. So let's do it each way. This is starting at the edge. This is a good candidate for this because the way the paper is, the fabric is, it's less likely to get folded this way. Now when you stitch towards the middle, continue stitching for about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to go ahead and cut this. Okay. Next, I think I'm going to sew all of these from the outside in. Let's just move my pin head a little bit here. And keep going. You want to go beyond that stitch line so it stays closed. If you can see that. There's this one. I'm going to keep my pin in there until I get into the paper at least. I should have pinned it the other way. You live and you learn. And one more, this one right here. Here's what I'm going to do. Can you see this? I'm just going to switch the direction of my pen before I get started. There we go. Now, okay, let's go and see what we've got here. Okay, so this is what we've sewn so far. I'm going to go ahead and take all of my pins out. Actually, I think I might leave these. See how that's floppy? I think I might go ahead and leave the far pins in. The ones that are holding this floppy piece of blue on, I will leave in, but I'll take out the ones that are close to my point because I've got to sew on the next part. So these two are done, minus being squared up, so I'm going to take out both pins for those two pieces. Let's give them all a press. So from the back, I'm just going to give it a press. Now on piece A left, I have instructions here for you to press the seam allowance toward the background after removing the paper, because for right now, it's going to be pressed towards the star point. Leave it on the paper and go ahead and press it because you want to get a good cut, a good squaring up cut from this. But after you take it off the paper, we're going to flip the seam allowance to the other side. I have a note in red to remind you about that. Our next step is going to be to cut away the excess fabric and prep each block for the next piece of fabric. So my A left and A right, I'm just going to set aside for now because I like to square everything up at the same time. With your pieces pressed open, you can cut away some excess around the edge of your section, just so you don't have things flopping around and getting in the way and possibly sewn into a seam where you don't want it to be sewn into, right? And these are rough cuts, but just make sure it's already pressed and open in its final position. Okay, so we've got those cleaned up. Now we're going to prep them for the next piece. So we're going to fold between 2 and 3. And where we stitched past this seam line, we're just going to gently pop the threads so that the paper can lay flat. Not pop the threads, you're actually going to tear the paper if necessary. You want your threads to stay, holding your fabric together. Then you're going to take your ruler and you're going to cut 1/4 of an inch away from the fold of the paper. Okay. I'm going to do this with all 4 of these that are left. So I'm going to fold between 2 and 3. I'm going to pull the fabric away from the paper. If the paper tears, it's okay. It's all right. The thing about using regular paper is it's all going in the garbage after anyway. With freezer paper, you can reuse it over and over again because you don't actually stitch through the paper. So that's another reason why I like the freezer paper. Okay, so there's that one. This one. All of these are going to be between 2 and 3. And last one, between 2 and 3. Now we're going to put on the light side of the star pieces. So these are the scraps that I have. And I need 4 pieces, so this is plenty. Let's see, I can probably get, for sure, I can get 1 piece out of this, maybe 2 pieces out of that, but I'm not going to chance it. We'll line these up right here, and I'm just going to cut these points off, and we'll use those for 3 of the pieces, and I'm generously cutting. And then this, I'm just going to give this a straight edge here. And I know that I want a lot of point on it, a little narrow point. Okay. And let's see if we can get these trimmed as well. Get myself some straight edges. Okay, so here's the pieces I'm going to use. These are 2-sided. Remember, if you're using regular fabric with the right side and the wrong side, you need to make sure that you have your cuts oriented correctly. Or be generous, and then you'll be able to kind of move it around anyway. All right, so I'm going to take one of these. This is my long edge, so I'm going to try to orient my long edge. Yeah, I like that other side, but it's the same. Okay, so I'm going to orient it with my long edge along my long edge, and look at that, I got plenty. So if I actually want to use the other side, No, I like that side. I like that side. Remember, face up or right side up when your paper is folded. Here's the number 3 piece that we're setting on there. We're lining up 1/4 inch here. I've got way more than 1/4 inch all the way around. I'm going to open it and I'm going to put a pin in there. I'm going to try to pin far enough away from my stitch line that I don't have to move my pins. All right, here's my number 3. What side do I like? I like this side, so that is my side that's going to be up. Place my piece on there. Plenty of space. Pin. This is my next one. I definitely want this side up. I'm using a lot of fabric. I usually am not this careful, but I really want you to use enough fabric when you piece this together. Maybe not this much fabric. All right, and this one. So that cut's not very straight, but it's okay. It's straight enough. It's going to be in the seam allowance, so nobody else is going to see it, right? Straight enough. Okay, so these 4 pieces that need to be sewn are ready to be sewn. And I'm checking the back, making sure that I don't have any kinks or anything. They're all ready to go. Let's get this camera going again. So again, I'm going to sew from the outside in, and we're sewing the line between 3 and 2. I still want to make sure I'm not folded up under there. And here we go. And I'm not going to try to sew super fast. I just want to stay on the line, and I want to sew beyond the end. And I'm going to cut my thread each time so I don't have to do any weird maneuvering there. Okay, that looks good. Stick that there. Here we go for the second piece. Couple stitches beyond. Okay, nothing's folded. Everything's flat. And one more. Okay, let's press these. All right, I'm going to take the pins out. I've left the ones that are in this blue piece out here just so it doesn't flop around. And let's give these a press. And a finger press and iron. They don't look really different from the other yellow now that it's on here like this, does it? If you're using freezer paper, make sure to press again from the front side so that you can stick that paper to the back of the freezer paper. It doesn't usually stick very well when you're just pressing from the fabric side. All right, now we're going to do the same thing that we did before. We're going to cut away the excess and prep it for the next piece, which will be the last piece for all of these. And I'm still staying outside of my paper as I trim this away because I don't want to mess it up. I want to leave a little excess for squaring. All right, so these are going to be the largest pieces that I put on that I need to set up next, between 3 and 4. So I want to fold this. I want to pop these new stitches, the paper where the stitches are. It's just a turn of phrase, I guess. And I've already cut 1/4 inch when I cut the first piece, but now I want to make sure that I get those pieces of the star tip off. Just pull those until you can lay everything flat. Okay, and I had this piece of fabric holding the blue in place, so I'm going to put it back in there. I just didn't want it to interfere with my ruler. Hold on. Flat, flat, flat. Make sure everything's flat. We'll put it this way. So I wanted to make sure I maintain my 1/4 inch there. I just want to make sure that my fabric stays flat. When I move this pin out of the way. All right. Now, I'm going to look at these, and these are the bigger pieces, the parts on C and this piece on B. They're both pretty big. So I think I'm going to go with C to measure my strip. Not sure this will be enough to get all 4 pieces, but we'll see. So B is the part that I want to get. I could go all the way off just to be safe. Like put my ruler there. And I think I will. See if we can get all 4 pieces off of this strip. I think this is part of the batik, but it looks like a stain, so I probably will be cutting that out whenever I use the rest of this. All right, so can I get this piece on here, or would it be better to get maybe this piece? Yes, yes. Now I need to decide which side's going to be the right side. And I think this one. Let's give it a little press. All right, so remember, if this is going to be my right side, when I try to determine which way to cut this, I want to have my paper open. So let's see. Yeah, I think this is the one we're going to use for this. And I'm going to place it this way. That is nice. That's going to work out nicely. And I'm going to give myself plenty. Sorry about It's Friday. I live in a tourist town, and you know, people want to act how they want to act. I think I told you that wrong. It should be right side up in this orientation. So since I did that the way I did it, I'm just going to stick with it because it's two-sided. But with the paper open, fabric should be right side down. Right side down. So I'm going to open this up and I'm going to put a couple of pins in, and I'm going to try to put them in so they're not in my path. But I want to get them at both ends so that my fabric doesn't rotate. See how it is on the back? That's how I want to sew it. So let's cut our next piece. Let's go with maybe C here, or B. Let's go with B. So I'm just gonna, is this the side that I want to be the right side? I think I want this to be the right side. So I want to put it face down to measure, to just gauge, right? I think that's going to do it. I'm just going to mirror this, give myself a cut. Okay, so now when I put this on, right, I gotta flip this as well, and it should fit. Remember, this is my edge, so I can come all the way to the edge of my paper here. I've got some buffer into the paper, and it's on the edge. 1/4 inch seam allowance, and the rest is edge. So good to go. And I'm going to move my pin here. So I grab this edge of it and pin right here. And hopefully I will be out of the way of my presser foot. That looks good on the back. Next, can we get the two out of this? So this is a triangle. This is even pointier. I think we'll do this one first. Which side do I want to be my front side? This side, I think. So I'm going to position this. And can I still get this? Or should I do this? I think this will be fine. This is the edge. That's going to be plenty. So I'm going to just freehand cut because I don't want to straight cut all the way through there. Just to separate it. Now when I fold this, I'm going to flip this over. Line that up. I've got fabric all the way around. It's pretty close right here, so I'm going to scooch it up a little bit. There we go. Now I've got fabric all the way around. This is an edge piece, so as long as I can see that fabric, I'm good. I'm going to put a couple of pins in. Okay, now that's ready to sew. And last but not least, I want this to be the back side. I think that will work right there. So I'm going to kind of parallel that edge, give myself plenty of space. Pull the paper out. Double check. So now I can turn it right side up. And position it on that cut. Looks good all the way around. Pin. And I'm just going to reposition this pin here. Pin. Yeah. Make sure it's flat on the back. And now these are ready to sew. Let's go sew the final side. All right, so I want to make sure that I check that this fabric is not folded under. And we're going to sew starting off the edge and finishing off the edge. Okay, next one. Everything is straight, starting off the edge and finishing off the edge. Next, it's my husband home. That's our loud garage door opening. Okay, and the last piece. All right, so the rest of the block will be a voiceover, and there's not much left. So I'll meet you at the other camera. Now all of our sections are sewn. We're going to separate the pieces and remove the pins. Then we're going to give each section a good press, and we'll start squaring up. A few notes about using freezer paper in contrast to using regular paper. So at this point, our seam allowances are pretty much where they are, though I have a hack that I'll do a little video on later. But with freezer paper, if you have a seam allowance that needs to go in the opposite direction for nesting, you can flip that seam allowance after the fact or as you go along. You could even open your seams if you wanted to, if you're using freezer paper. Notice that I have a little bit of fabric beyond the edge along with that little bit of paper because it's rough cut. When I put my ruler on these pieces to square them up, I am putting the ruler on top of the outline so that the outline is retained after the cut. I don't know if you noticed that you can still see the black line all the way around. That's very important for proper sizing of your pieces so that they fit together correctly. Also, if you're using freezer paper, you'll be using that pattern piece again, and you could inadvertently change the shape or size if you cut away those outlines. On these A pieces, remember we got done with those quickly because they only had two parts. I have some little notches there to help you with alignment so that you can get them squared up on your two halves, but those are optional if you don't want to cut those off. And there, everything is cleaned up. Now let's lay it out. Remember that our pattern pieces are in reverse of the actual block because it's put together on the back side. I thought it looked pretty good. Next thing we need to do is take off the paper. So that A part that I skipped over has a little note in red that says to flip the seam allowance after you take the paper off. If you're using freezer paper, go ahead and flip that seam allowance before you take the paper off. Then press it so that it reattaches to the freezer paper and then cut it. That way you won't get the little pull that you'll see later as we line this up. So we have all the paper off. If you have a little left in the seams, it's okay. With washing, it'll come out. But what we need to line up here is the center of the star and where the star leg meets on the outside of the star. And then because we're working with that little point and a bunch of seam allowances there, I'm going to start off with a little piece of scrap fabric. And then I'm just going to take my time and slowly sew my 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Those are the 2 points that I had to have pinned, so I got good alignment. And you should have a little bit of nesting action there to help you stay aligned. So this is the other side. You might have to give it a little assist because you have that little piece of fabric going in first. You might want to sew from the opposite end, but I try to sew closest to the end where my seam allowances need to match. That way, if they don't match, as I push out, I can kind of just cut that away. So this piece here, I stitched a little curve there. So I decided to correct that. See, that's a straight line. The other one, I have a bow right in the middle. So I'm going to remove those stitches and just reattach that again. Even though everything's aligned, my stitch line itself is a little strange. So don't be afraid to take it apart and make corrections. And this is the time to do it. If you allow that not to be aligned in the center on this part, then your star is not going to come together in the center at the end. So if the center lines of each of your star point don't come together a quarter of an inch away from the edge, then your finished star is not going to come together in the center. So go ahead and fix that if you see you have a problem. And when you press the seam allowances, you want to press them in the same direction as the other seam allowances on that half. So I think I'm going to flip this over so you can see. But see how all the seam allowances are going in the same direction on each half? That's because at the end of this, they're going to spiral around clockwise. And that'll give you a nice flat block. So remember that. So this is the A side that you don't need to flip the seam allowance on. Again, you're going to pin it right where the star points come together on the outside of the star. And on this one, we want to flip the seam allowance, and it may pull a little bit. So make sure that you really get it open on the opposite side to kind of compensate for that weird thing that's going to happen when you flip the seam allowance. And again, you want to pin it so that those outside corners where the points meet are aligned at a quarter of an inch. Also, I don't start right at the end. I start in the middle. So where those seams come together are where I drop my needle, not at the beginning of the fabric. You can, if you drop it at the beginning of the fabric, it'll be fine. But by leaving it loose there in the middle, which I'm going to show you how I keep it loose there a little bit, I think it makes it a little easier for me to get things aligned in the end. I may be weird about that, so I don't want to say absolutely do that. See how it's a little strange here where I flip the seam allowance there? But again, I have a little bit loose right in the middle because I drop my needle right where all the seams come together to start my stitch line here. It gives me a little more flexibility in getting things aligned, I think, in the end. I'm going to use the two pin method. So I'm sticking a pin straight down through the centers where all the seams come together, which should be a quarter of an inch from the edge. And then I'm going to take a second pin and pin across where that first pin is so that I don't tilt it and shift it in any way. I've got to match the top of the star points where it should nest now, and I've got to nest between the legs of the bottom of the star as well. I sometimes pin those outside areas, sometimes I don't. Here I'm checking to make sure that I have a straight line to stitch, close enough to a straight line to stitch. If it is bowed, you're going to get a concave or convex block, so make sure that it's straight, and if it's not straight, you might need to make some corrections. So I'm making sure that I'm stitching right through those intersections at a quarter of an inch as I go up. Now let's see what we've got. Oh, I've got a bow. Sometimes I just stitch it weird, so when I get to all those seams in the middle, so I just go back in and fix it. So there's the self-induced bow by your stitching, and there's the bow that's caused by um, not having the halves sewn together correctly. So there's a lot of bulk right there in the middle of the star. I just like to snip that out. I leave 1/8 of an inch of fabric beyond the stitch line. You really do not want to stitch through your cut through your stitches. That'll be terrible because your whole thing will come apart. But notice how all the seam allowances go to the left on this side and they all go to the right at the top. So I'm going to press the seam allowance that I just sewed in half. So one half is going to go to the top and the other one's going to go to the bottom, and that makes all of my seam allowances go clockwise around the back of the quilt. And there, or the quilt block I should say, is how it turned out. And I think the center turned out better than my prototype. I did swap the colors light and dark on the pattern, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I hope my customer is happy as well. Let's wrap this up. Well, there you have it, my friends. The tiny star on a spinning block. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something that you can apply to other foundation paper piece patterns that you want to try. I have quite a few of them, but many people have them, and it's a skill that once you have it in your toolkit, you'll be able to adapt it to anything. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. I try to answer them within 24 hours while I have a small following, and I would love to have you come back. If you're interested, please subscribe, give me a like, and select the notification bell because I do not post on a regular basis. I post whenever I get projects finished. I would love to see you again. And let's see, what do I have coming up next? African Queen block, I think. African Queen block. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. See you soon.